Opposed? Carried. Take notice this public meeting of the Central Board of Education was faxed to the Home News and Star Ledger in accordance with Chapter 231 Public Law 1975. Further, in accordance with NJSA 10:4-6 and 21, a copy of this notice is posted outside the Secretary's office and was also filed with the Clerk of the Borough of Cerro. Please rise for the pledge to the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, Mr. DeAndre.
Mr. Bauer. Here. Mrs. Backer.
Here.
Mrs. Bloom.
Here.
Mr. Brzezinski.
Here.
Mrs. DePinto.
Here.
Mr. McEnon. Mrs. Trapp.
He's here.
Mr. Walsh.
Here.
Mr. Simon.
Here. Executive, if you cover what we discussed.
This evening, in executive under attorney-client privilege, the Board of Education discussed the Sayreville Education Association contract language for tuition reimbursement. Also, for the lease of facility space, and also student discipline for a middle school student. Under negotiations, the Board of Education discussed the Sayreville Education Association contract on negotiations and Sayreville Education Association grievance number 6. Under personnel, Sayreville Education Association member request for sick pay. We never got to that one other item, so I'll strike it. Personnel agenda items, the minimum wage agenda item, the high school status of the vacant high school principal, vice principal position, and on the student discipline, HIB reports 14 and 15.
Thank you, Mr. DeAndrea. We have two presentations, one of which will be at 7:30 by Dr. Bowen, and the other one, I believe, Dr. Alfano, is you.
Yes, I would. This is School Board Member Recognition Month, January, and we always usually even give a plaque. This time we give a little bit of we give a card.
No check.
There was usually a check in there, but we're a little light today. But we do recognize that this is not an easy position to be in. You get top dollar for this. And we, the administration, want to thank you for everything that you do and just acknowledge the fact that it is School Board Member Month. So thank you for everything, and have a good rest of January, since it's been such a nice, warm, convenient month.
Thank you very much. All right, we'll move on to correspondence. We have the monthly technology work order report and the monthly maintenance work order reports. And then we'll move on to the approval of minutes. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes of the regular and executive session of December 17th?
So moved.
By Mrs. Bloom, do I have a second?
Second.
By Mr. Walsh. Any remarks or comments on the minutes? Hearing none, roll call.
Mr. Balcom.
Yes.
Mrs. Backer.
Yes.
Mrs. Bloom.
Yes.
Mr. Brzezinski.
I'll be abstaining, I was absent from that meeting.
Mrs. DePinto.
Yes.
Mr. McEnon.
Yes.
Mrs. Trapp.
Yes.
Mr. Walsh.
Yes.
And Mr. Simon.
Yes. Student Council Representative report. I don't see our Student Council rep. Is there anyone here from? Okay, if not, does one of the PIC representatives, either Ms. Eichner or one of the board members, wish to give a report on the Common Core meeting that I know you held this month?
I'm not on the PIC.
No.
And I was
Okay, the PIC meeting on January 13th was very well attended. We had approximately 65 parents in attendance, and we had numerous board members. Ms. Facendo, Mr. Burr, and myself were the administrators who were there. And the topic was the Common Core. I think that was why we had such a large audience. So I did a presentation about Common Core, gave a few examples, and answered parents' questions concerning the Common Core. And there were, as we expected, a number of questions. The presentation and the handouts, along with a list of resources, is available on the district website under the heading of News, and we will be shortly putting up a section on there for frequently asked questions concerning the Common Core. We collected some questions from the parents that evening, and I encourage the parents to reach out to me if they have any additional questions. So all in all, it was a very good meeting. It lasted at least 2 hours, and it was great to see so many parents come out about such an important topic.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Eichner. Any questions on the PIC meeting?
Mrs. Syack, can
Yes.
I comment, please? I would like to compliment Mrs. Zeiton for her grace under fire. It got a little hairy there, but she was prepared and she calmed all the parents' concerns, and I think it was a good meeting. I was very enlightened myself, and I think most of the parents got it when she was finished.
Good.
Thank you, Mrs.
Okay, hearing no other comments, we'll move on to the district highlights. Mrs. DePinto.
Anyone who was in the high school auditorium the weekend of January 11th and 12th was transported back to New York City and Sweet Apple, Ohio in 1958 as the middle school students performed the hit musical Bye Bye Birdie. The singing, acting, dancing, and scenery were all outstanding and helped recreate the magnificence of the Broadway musical. If you closed your eyes and listened, you would not believe that this was a group of middle school students as they performed well beyond their years. Congratulations goes out to the entire cast, Mrs. Malera, Mrs. Campbell, Mr. Palma, and Ms. Tarr for a magnificent effort. To paraphrase Leo Ducar, can't wait till next year. On Saturday, January 11th, the Sayreville War Memorial High School varsity Bomber cheerleaders took first place in the Rebel Classic Cheer Championship competition at Howell High School in their division of varsity small all music. Two of the girls also participated in individual competitions and competed against other cheerleaders from schools all over the state of New Jersey. Sharice Jackson placed first in the jump-off competition, and Victoria DePinto placed in the tumble-off competition. These girls show a great amount of dedication and hard work to the sport of cheerleading and are continually making a name for the Sayreville Bomber cheerleading program at each competition they attend. Congratulations to our Bomber cheerleaders. On Saturday, January 18th, the Sayreville Public Schools held a Falling in Love with Reading fundraiser at the East Brunswick Barnes & Noble. There were a variety of activities planned for our students and their families. The event was extremely well attended by our staff, students, and families. Mrs. Coffey and Mrs. Davis, principals of Truman and Wilson, as well as a number of teachers, hosted a performance as well as that included a cheer about the importance of reading. Ms. Gunter and Ms. Cardillo, the librarians of Arlitt and Eisenhower, hosted choral readings for children to participate in reading to one another. Dr. Alfano, Mrs. Zeichner-Shediak, and Mr. Syack also came out to support our schools. There was over $6,500 in sales, a portion of which will go to a summer reading initiative. The event was organized by Tanya Rivera, the supervisor of language arts, and Amy Stuber, the supervisor of elementary education. There will be another fundraiser in the spring to kick off summer reading initiative. Compliments to Sayreville War Memorial High School Lady Bomber Jackie Rodriguez for scoring 1,000 career points in basketball. This is an incredible accomplishment and we couldn't be more proud. Congratulations, Jackie. On January 18th, Sayreville War Memorial High School was host to the second annual Symphonic Band Invitational of Central New Jersey. This is a symphonic band consisting of over 100 high school students who were nominated by 25 school districts in Central Jersey. Essentially, these students were deemed all-county. The concert included classic marches, contemporary compositions, and a percussion feature. The band was conducted by Dr. William Burrs, a professor of music at Rutgers University. Over 20 students were selected to represent Sayreville. Our band director, Dr. Paul Caruso, was responsible for organizing and orchestrating the event. Congratulations to all involved in making this experience a musical extravaganza. On January 23rd, students from the Samsel Upper Elementary School performed their annual winter concert in front of over 500 people. The program opened with the singing of the national anthem, followed by the 4th grade chorus. The selections of the chorus contained a theme of water, as well as all songs about rain, oceans, etc. Following the 4th graders, then band, which is comprised of over 90 students, performed melodies, some traditional, some contemporary. The 5th grade chorus concluded the evening, continuing the theme of water songs. All who attended had a great time and really got into the performance. Congratulations to all the participants and to Mrs. Coleman and Mrs. Wells, their instructors, on an outstanding performance.
Thank you, Mrs. DePinto. I also want to highlight the Barnes & Noble event that was mentioned. That's basically a smorgasbord of all of the efforts that we've had, in particular at the elementary and upper elementary level, to really focus in on our language arts and reading scores. So, I mean, we had the Truman School cheerleaders there. I know Wilson School is doing the whole thing with photographs of their staff Dr. Alfano, Ms. Eichner, myself, Ms. Fisenko, we're all on their walls encouraging students to read. So we're really trying to build some energy and momentum around the language arts program in an effort to drive our standardized assessments. Any other comments on the highlights? Hearing none, Dr. Alfano, we'll turn it over to you for your superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mr. Sire. Section A, Building and Grounds, there's only one resolution, and it's the approval of the Odyssey of the Mind on March 1st. Any questions? Moving with none, moving to B. Our first 12 resolutions are our regular resolutions. 13 is the new online service, management service for the cafeteria. 15 are our students getting the cost of living increase that work in our offices. We need to create a number of part-time paraprofessionals as a result of mandated programs. Some technology supplies in the amount of $2,800 for New Jersey non-public technology grant. Attendance of Ms. Zeichner to a school board's event, and Mr. Kotanovich, the athletic director, attending his regular workshop. Number 20, salary grant offsets is noted. Any questions with section B?
Go ahead.
Video. On number 4, the bill list for the cafeteria. We're paying ice cold novelty products for that baseball yogurt machine rental. Can you check, make sure we're still using that machine next year? And days that we're not using the machine, if not, can we maybe end the lease or whatever we have with them? So we. Number 8 and number 8A, I'm going to abstain on. And number 13, no.
Any other comments on finance from the board? Yes.
Just a clarification, because I know we discussed this a while ago, for number 13, the $1.95 is the cost being picked up by the parent.
By the parent, yes.
That-
Any other questions on finance? Mr. DeAndrea, I just need to abstain on a check for Premier Printing Solutions on the bill list. Dr. Alfano, back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Sire. Moving to section C, personnel non-certified. We have a retirement, a resignation, some professional days, and substitutes. Any questions with that section? With none, moving to D, certified. Again, we have a few resignations, a retirement, a few pregnancy leaves, a grant of an extension of child rearing leave, another child rearing leave, some coaching assignments as noted in number 8, volunteer advisor to the art club, which is number 9, Mr. Kraft being appointed to the district technology director. Again, professional days as noted in number 11, some employment as noted in number 12. Here we go again with our tutorial programs, which has been very successful over the years. Number 13 deals with the tutorial in the SUES. Number 14 is a new Title III, which is the ELL, or ESL students in the tutorial program from grades 4 to 12. And finally, number 15 is our substitute list. Any questions with section D?
I have a question. Page 10, for the high school, we have a math teacher sub. The extension is only a week. Are we filling that job permanently? Why is it only a week? Are we looking for a teacher?
No, the regular teacher who was being replaced for the week was on a medical leave, and he needed to extend it just 1 week.
Oh, okay, this is medical leave. It's
Right.
not someone who left.
No,
Okay.
no, it's just a medical leave.
Thank you.
Dr. Alfano, just a comment on Mrs. Skordinsky's retirement.
Yes, I'm sorry, I forgot about that.
I would really like to recognize Mrs. Skordinsky. She's a 20-year employee, came with us in 1994, has taught our AP English program at the high school for many, many years. And when you think about the definition of a master teacher, Janet Skordinsky is a master teacher. Someone who is extremely distinguished in her profession, in her subject area, in her knowledge, and also distinguished in classroom control, classroom management, the way her students respect her. She's really a mentor and a role model for a lot of our teachers here today. And while I'm very happy that she is retiring for her sake and for her well-earned time, it really is a loss for us because Janet's been an outstanding employee and an outstanding teacher in our district.
Thank you for picking that up, Mr. Sion.
I'd just like to echo Kevin's comments a little bit. Mrs. Skordinski, like Kevin said, came 20 years ago, and I remember well because it was the spring of 1993. I was a senior here at Sayreville, and if you can imagine a teacher coming into a class of a bunch of seniors in April and May when we pretty much knew where we were going to college, and we were pretty much done. And what she did with us in that short time was unbelievable. I've had the pleasure of working with her as a colleague also, and so I've gotten her to tell her this, but I'm going to want to say it publicly. All the success I had in college, I attribute to her. She taught me how to write a paper. And I had great teachers all through Sayreville, but what Kevin said is not an exaggeration. She is exemplary, one of the best. So I'd like to thank her again.
Anyone else? Dr. Alfano?
Thank you. Moving to E, policy, there's no report. F, curriculum. There are regular 3 reports on harassment, intimidation, and bullying, 13, 14, and 15. Student discipline hearing on the 27th, that is the disposition approval that we discussed in closed. New courses as listed in number 3. Title changes in number 4 as noted. Middlesex County Arts Middle and High School Program students is listed in number 5. Number 6 are our special services resolutions on placements and programs. Any questions with that section? With none, moving to G, co-curriculum. This is our annual peer leadership class to attend the annual Camp Bernie retreat on the dates noted. Different activities for number 2 for the middle school. PTO will be having an annual care night, as well as a 6th and 7th grade dance. The Snapple Bowl football North-South game will be held this year in Sayreville on July 17th at 7 p.m. Moving to number 4, page 16. These are, the next few are different banquets that are being held, sports days and so on and so forth. As noted, some luncheons, some dinners through 4, 5, 6, and 7. Mr. Sayreville event. No, I will not be doing it this year. Girls and boys soccer fundraiser. There's a walking field trip as noted in number 9. Approve a field trip for the Auto Technology Club. In number 10, the Samsel Upper Elementary School will hold 4 family fitness and food and fun nights. And retroactively, the UES will hold another art show as part of the, did hold it in 2014 Winter Arts. Any questions with that section?
Dr. Alfano, on curriculum, I just need to abstain on the Arts High School program because I'm on the board of trustees of that nonprofit.
Thank you, Mr. Sion. Moving to section 8, support services, the waiver of transportation, some routing, renewal of routings for transportation. Sayreville High School academic competition team trips as noted in number 4. Some cheerleading competitions as noted, and 6 field trips. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Dr. Alfano. Does the board have any questions regarding the superintendent's report? Okay, hearing none, we'll open it up to public participation. If you've got a question or comment on the superintendent's report, please come to the microphone and state your name and address for the record. Hearing none, we'll close public, and I'll take a motion to approve the superintendent's report. By Mrs. DePinto, do I have a second? By Mr. McEnroe. Any remarks? Roll call.
Mr. Balkin.
Yes, accept items noted.
Mrs. Backer.
Yes.
Mrs. Bloom.
Yes.
Mr. Brzezinski.
Yes.
Mrs. DePinto.
Yes.
Mr. McElwain.
Yes.
Mrs. Kraft.
Yes.
Mr. Walsh.
Yes.
And Mr. Sire.
Yes. On the delegate to the New Jersey School Boards Association, two pieces of important legislation were passed with regard to, first of all, the moving of the deadline for petition filing for the local boards of education. It's no longer the date of the June primary. It is now the last Monday in July, and that takes effect for this year. So that'll bring the petition filing deadline closer to when the actual election is held. And in addition to that, for the school districts that moved their election to November, a bill was passed that allows us to have additional time to develop the annual school budget. So basically, the entire school budget process has been moved back about 3 to 4 weeks to give us additional time, bring it closer to the end of the school year, and also closer to when that budget will be implemented. So that's a big help. But that concludes my report from New Jersey School Boards. On committee reports, I don't think any committees have met. You have the committee list. I sent that out. I know Mr. Balka has already sent out a note to the Finance Committee, getting them in gear in terms of the budget as soon as Mr. DeAndrea is ready. And I think Mrs. Bloom is also scheduling a curriculum meeting. And as soon as I get back from DC, I'll be also scheduling a policy committee.
I just have a comment on committee reports.
Yep.
We did meet with the auditor under finance for the audit report.
Oh, okay.
And there was basically one concern, one that I've had for years, but I think it's time that we step up and make a decision. The cafeteria audit, there was another $90,000 loss this year. And Mr. DeAndrea wasn't present because he was out that week, so just... and according to the auditor, that did not include the equipment that we had purchased, that the system, the one that we just voted on tonight, that's allowing us to...
That's this year's budget.
Right, it's in this year. So that large expenditure is not included in that loss because it's in this calendar year or this school year. So with another loss of $90,000, that brings our balance to $118,000. Okay. If we sustain another loss of that magnitude and then add the equipment, we're going to start operating at a net loss. And I know we had negotiated lower salaries and the payroll costs were supposed to get better under control, but I don't know that that's necessarily happening because that was supposed to be one of the things that was supposed to help us. So I asked the auditor, where do we go from here and what are the options? And his two options were, one, raise prices, which we all know we can't because we're at the max.
Well,
Or the
we're not
other,
at the max right now.
we were at the max.
No, we're not.
We're not right now.
No, but we had been. And
I don't believe in last year we were at the max.
we were sustaining losses at the max, whatever. So whatever the max is next year and whatever revenue, I just want, because we had always discussed we're going to need to talk about this ahead of time before it hits the agenda to vote. And we talked about that the last time we had to vote, that we would look into this. So the other option would be if we're going to start operating at a net loss, the general fund is going to have to start contributing, which
Isn't
me
We can't.
personally, huh?
We can't by law. It's not allowed.
So I think it's time to seriously look at where the issues are, and with these type of large losses, we need to have a plan on what we're going to do to go forward, whether it is to raise prices, whether it is a payroll problem, but when you look at the payroll costs, you can't really, because the director came up and one of the answers she said was one of the reasons she's having issues is because of the high labor costs. That was fixed, or at least that's what we thought.
Again, I don't believe last year for 12-13 we were at the maximum. The board agreed not to raise, I believe, to put in an increase last year.
Right, but I thought we didn't put it, I thought we had been running at the max for years.
Prior to that, but then last year when the increase came, I don't believe we increased last year. We haven't increased this year either.
We didn't increase, but we're sustaining what we had been charging, we never lowered it.
Right,
We're
but it
always
wasn't the
right.
max. The state was still allowing us to go higher.
So
The
I
other
think there
part
needs to be
is-
an analysis done of whether that is the option
Well,
to go, or,
And I can tell you, part of the other things is the increased cost with the new requirements of nutrition. All of these nutritional food costs, whole wheat, all these whole grains are a lot more costly than the others. So there has been an increase on our food supply also.
okay, but
in the
my
past
question
few
is,
years.
what's the answer to fix this if we can't keep sustaining these
And
losses?
I don't think we're going to answer that now, because,
No.
I mean, at least some of us didn't know
What I
this was
can
coming up
do,
tonight.
what I can do is I'll sit
I
with
wasn't
what I-
looking for an answer,
Right, but
I
what
just
I-
want an answer before we have to.
Right,
vote
but
on
what I
this.
think would be appropriate is to refer it to the Finance and Infrastructure Committee and have them work with Mr. DeAndrea and take a look at the cafeteria program and come back with recommendations, whether it be cost out, increased prices, what have you?
We have to look at it, and I've already had discussions with Mrs. Jenkins in preparation for next year as to try and rework how staffing is done. And the biggest problem we're encountering is that we have to bring staff in for breakfast in the morning, because we're now serving breakfast, and how that overlaps to the lunch and things of that nature. So we will look at it, and in all regards. So let me first have the opportunity to meet with her.
Right, because one of
See
the
where
issues which
she's
Dan
at.
brought up was that machine that we've been paying for rent, and I was under the impression too that we're not using it.
Yeah,
So-
again, I have no
And I
knowledge.
understood that was profitable. I mean, when we
I
brought
have
it
no
in.
knowledge that if they're using it or not, I couldn't tell you either way. I mean, I'm
So
not hearing it.
for our mid-March meeting, is that reasonable in terms of coming back with a recommendation?
I'm gonna ask for a little more time, I'm already
Okay.
trying to figure out a $2 million deficit in the budget, and that's a bigger priority right now to get us to the cap first. So allow me to work with Shelley and get those answers. But I'll try and get back to the finance committee and schedule something.
Okay.
Can I
Is there-
just make a comment?
Is it on the lunch, or
On what we're
are
talking
you
about
on
now?
lunch?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay.
I'll yield
I'm sorry.
to the lady.
I think just for public information, that everyone should be aware of the fact that the cafeteria is self-sustaining. So whatever they take in covers their salaries, covers what food that they have to buy, covers their medical, am I correct?
Yes, they've been charged for their
Everything
medical.
they pay for themselves. So it's not like the district is funding this and we're still losing money. It's whatever comes in pays for all of those salaries, pays for their medical, pays for the food, so that's something that the general population probably
Yeah,
didn't.
last year there was sufficient money in the, I'll say, the savings to keep them operating without running out of money. So,
Right,
yes.
but now we're getting down to the
We're
wire,
getting
we're
down,
going to
back
run
down,
out of
yes.
money. So we
Yes,
need
we
to
are.
look at this.
Mr. McEnroe?
How far back do records go as far as how many meals per day are purchased in each school?
I would have to check with Ms. Jenkins, I don't recall.
So, when we do this analysis, I like to see that, before we went to this healthy menu item, because if we talk to the customers,
Oh, I
the
know.
issue
Oh,
is
yeah.
people not buying the food because they're not liking the new healthy menu. So what was happening, and this woman was correct, we're spending more money to purchase the food and we're selling less meals. So in anybody's book, that's not, numbers are not.
Right, and I can tell you that that has been a reality, and I know that with my own children. And when they do sometimes have lunch at my school, they say, Dad, I throw half of it away because I don't really want 4 pounds of broccoli, although I'm required to put it on there.
Right, but I think maybe we could look at other places. The auditor did, because we talked about it, and the auditor did bring up one school that he knew that he did that actually was showing profits. So I'm not sure
Okay.
what they're doing that's we're
Well, I
not.
can tell you, it's probably working with a management company, and what they do is they come in and they take your staff, and instead of paying them our rate, they take away the benefits, they chop them down to close to minimum wage.
That's
and
called
they-
something that we decided we didn't want to do.
Exactly, yes,
Yes.
the board
Right, but we
decided
don't,
several times.
most, our cafeteria people for the most part are part-time, so they don't get benefits.
No, but some do, I'm talking to managers and things of that nature are getting it. So there's cost in that, but when you take someone's salary from 20 down to $9, that's a big impact. And that's a discussion some members of this board were on several years ago when they said, no, we're not looking to do that to our community members. And I think we even entertained getting a proposal from someone.
Right, we did, but now
And
we're
then-
at the wire where we only probably have another year
And,
left.
and we're gonna move on. I mean, let's get it to the finance
We'll have the
committee,
discussion, we'll look at
bring
it
a recommendation
and
back.
see where we are going
And-
this year.
But also, what I'd like to know is, what if we do not provide the ounces of broccoli we're supposed to? What happens? Is there
You
a
lose the
vegetable
funding.
police? How much funding do we get, and are we getting the right amount of funding based on our population?
Yes, we are. We're getting the maximum amount. We actually qualified for an additional 6 cents. At one point in time, we filed for an additional 6 cents per meal, and we qualified based on our nutritional guidelines that we're following. So we're doing our part to make sure Ms. Jenkins does. Ms. Jenkins is very precise with her nutritional values and all of that other stuff that I'm aware of. We've had numerous audits, be not only financial but nutritional, and we come through very well every time with what we're providing to students.
Okay, but what would happen, like now we're in, this audit was for last year, now we're in this year. What happens if we lose more than 118,000? What do we do?
Then you have to raise it in your budget, and then you have to put a corrective action plan as to how you're going to correct it in that regard. So
So
we're looking
where
at
would the
it.
money come from? The general funds?
You have the right, you have the budget for it, yes. So we've been talking, we're looking at it. It's unfortunate that these new nutritional guidelines are really what have taken it in a different direction because the cost of those products are much greater than having the other products, where I hate to put it to non-nutritional, but the, less nutritional, thank you, products. And it's unfortunate, and I know we are not the only district having that experience. And I believe there's also new guidelines coming out that are going to take away some of those strict nutritional guidelines and kind of go back to some other items that the kids are probably going to be more happy to eat than throwing away.
And on a more positive note, I think looking at the balances and the surplus, despite how we finagle every year in June and put away the capital surplus, I think we did just fine this year.
I think we're going to struggle because now our operating fund balance is quite low, and to sustain that year after year for tax relief is where our bigger concern now deals with. And it's part of what we're dealing with now with the current budget, not having sufficient tax relief to help support it. So we're basically at $1 million increase on an annual budget of 80-some-odd million dollars. So an increase by only $1 million on 80 is not very much without having your surplus to help with that tax relief. So we have the capital reserve, but we now have to look at our fund balance for operating also.
Okay, and we also, I know we discussed this months ago, something else for the Finance Committee, or well, it was for the Buildings and Grounds Committee, a recommendation for the capital funds?
Yes, and we discussed that today, and as far as Dr. Alfano and I, we spoke today, is with a capital reserve currently of $1.9 million, and all of the ROD grants out there, there is really no need to put money into your operating budget for capital improvements because you have $1.9 million that you can use. Make use of that money for your project. No need to put anything into the budget, especially since we have the ROD grants. I called down yesterday, today's Tuesday, I called yesterday trying to find out where our final eligible cost letters are. They're off of the local person that handles ours, has not come out of the department. The downside is everything I'm receiving from my association is saying do not enter into any contracts that are tied to the School Development Authority funds prior to having a signed agreement from them. So it puts a lot of things in abeyance because you're not certain when things are going to move forward. And knowing that we have a roof, we have security things and other things of that nature, we're a little bit behind the 8 ball, to say. What I may be doing is recommending to the board, either at the 4th meeting or the 18th, is to at least move forward with the architects to start developing the plans and the specifications for the 2 items, the roof and the security, which are 2 things that were basically more or less agreed upon by the board. So that if I get the SDA agreement letter sometime in April, we're already out, we've already bid, we can just turn around and award. The downside is awarding your contract at the point, if you award the contract before you have your School Development Authority letter signed. That's where the problem comes in, but you can go out, you can bid it, and ask the contractors to hold their pricing 60, 90 days so that we can possibly do those projects this summer.
Mr. President, so
Yes.
does the Finance Committee meet with the auditor?
The old finance committee met with the auditor.
Yeah.
And what did the auditor say?
We just explained the fund balance and how we were doing better than because we left them like 600,000 a year before, and this year you ended up with $1 million. I can't remember the numbers.
After the appropriation of 1.6, we're down to 1.3.
It's double what we had the year before.
Right.
That's
Then
good.
we focused on the, we lost $98,000 in revenue in sales and the cafeteria. The expenses went up like $97,000. That's why we're really sucking wind in the cafeteria.
That's been a problem. So I haven't met with the auditor, but I read the audit report, and it's my impression that it's a clean audit, and that the financial situation of our district is in good hands with you and your staff.
Thank you, Mr.
This
McEnroe.
is another clean audit.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other items of the committees? We told the public that we would start at 7:30 for the redistricting, so I'm going to jump ahead if it's okay with the board. If there's any other items for discussion? And if not, we'll just take a brief pause and wait till approximately 7:30 in case anyone else is showing up.
Do we have hard copies that you?
Also, under the discussion section, and as a follow-up to the Vision 2030 concept, I asked every board member to come here tonight with 3 Post-it notes detailing 3 major initiatives, major opportunities, or major threats to the district that we need to address. So in the next 10 minutes, I'm going to put 3 sheets of paper up on the wall, each referring to one of our committees: Student Achievement 2030, Personnel 2030, and Finance and Infrastructure 2030. And then board members who have those Post-it notes, you can put them up under the appropriate committee. Those will be turned over to the committee so the committees can use them in terms of setting their agenda for the coming year. And with that, we'll take a 9-minute recess. And now we're beginning the discussion of redistricting. Just to bring everyone up to speed as to where we were, because I know it's been a few months. When the board last met on this topic in May, we discussed where we wanted to go with redistricting. It was in committee. The board was basically split in terms of where we wanted to go, and we were unsure. We had Dr. Alfano's recommendation, and the board basically opted to get a second unbiased opinion from outside the district in an effort to make a recommendation and some suggestions in terms of how we can best address the overcrowding issue that we're seeing at the elementary level. Before we did that, the board adopted a goal statement, which you'll note on your agenda. The Board of Education will approve a cost and educational effective facility solution which maintains or reduces current elementary school class sizes and provides for the accommodation of additional growth in the number of elementary classes which we can reasonably forecast within the next decade. So that basically is the scope of the problem that this particular board is attempting to solve. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Bowen.
Can I just say one thing?
Absolutely.
The report is on the web, so if you want a full report, we put some copies out that people are sharing. It's up on the screen as well as it is on the web. It's on our website. So if you have access to the website, you can certainly download the report, which we try not to kill too many trees.
Okay. And we'll turn it over to Dr. Bowen, and hopefully the heat will be on shortly.
Well, thank you very
I
much.
just sent a text message.
Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the board, Dr. Alfano and the administration. We're very pleased to be here this evening to speak to the report and the study that we conducted and to field any questions that you may have. First, I want to sincerely thank the members of the administration that are acknowledged in the report for all their kind help, their availability, and their candor in answering questions and accompanying myself as I toured the buildings, made contacts with them by phone and email, and gathered the information that was necessary to get to the outcome of the report. I'm going to speak to a number of talking points, and then from there I'll field the question, because I do know that you've had the report in advance and have had the opportunity to read it. First of all, when we first met with the administration and the representatives of the board, one of the items in the forefront of the reason to do this was to understand the effect on student achievement. And that's always in order for everything we do in the business of education. We did an exhaustive study on the effect of grade span on student achievement. And the outcome is there's no particular grade span configuration in and of itself that enhances, accelerates, or produces increased student achievement. There are many other factors, and in this study we talk about the effective schools movement, a number of achievement influences on improving student outcomes, and I will defer to my study and research partner, Dr. Antunes, who will just briefly mention the positive side of how we do improve student achievement. But as far as the study is concerned, the grade span configurations, and there are many ways to do this throughout the nation. I It mentions some possibilities and some numbers that reflect grade span models throughout the nation, but Dr. Antunes will speak to what does improve student achievement.
Good evening, thank you. So, as Dr. Bowen indicated, there are so many configurations, but as the report says, 2,500 public schools in the state of New Jersey alone. Forget about the rest of the country. And what's important is that no matter whether it's a rural, suburban, urban, affluent, disadvantaged, high-performing, low-performing districts, there are overall essentially 9 characteristics that make for high-performing school districts. They are in the report. I can go through some of them quickly for you. But without a doubt, hiring, recruiting, and retaining good teachers is your #1 priority. The #1 priority of every board ought to be hiring and retaining good teachers and providing them with ongoing, sustained, and embedded professional development to enhance their learning, which then what happens is student achievement becomes an ancillary benefit to the learning that's taking place in the classroom. You're not teaching to the test. You're teaching students how to think, which the teachers are getting that professional development because you're supporting that, and an ancillary benefit of that is increased student achievement. Additionally, things like effective leaders. You want effective teachers, you need effective leaders. Principals, building bays, directors, teacher leaders, all important. Holding high standards and expectations for students. Many people say that they believe that all students can learn. And if one truly believes that all students can learn, then you've got to talk the talk and walk the walk. And the way to do that is not to give up on students, not to give up on teachers, but hold those expectations for students, because they will meet those expectations. Of course, aligning your curriculum. I heard earlier you had a core curriculum meeting and a Common Core meeting. Aligning your curriculum to the New Jersey Core Curriculum Content Standards and the Common Core. And again, providing professional development for the teachers and differentiating that instruction. The feds took it to a whole nother level when they went to the Common Core. Guided, common, formative, and summative assessments that the teachers have time to talk about what they believe and what the state is letting us know they believe to be essential questions, enduring understandings. What are those things that the teachers agree the students need to know, and providing time for them to work together, gather the data for their students, and then talk about it and figure out a way to, your teachers talking together and one teacher saying, I don't know, my students didn't do so well here. What did you do in your classroom that day? Giving them the time to do that, embedded into the school day. And of course, a supportive learning environment. What I mean by that is Sagerville has these things, and respected, teachers are respected, parents are respected, students are respected, safe learning environments. Those are the essential elements for high-achieving, high-performing schools, no matter where you are in the country or the state. That's what we're looking for. The ancillary benefits of having all those things in place and doing it well and spending the time to do it well will be increased student achievement.
We were able to find a few articles and research findings on beginnings and notions of grade span that might affect student achievement. There were no statistical follow-ups, very little data, just the notion and idea of certain school leaders around the country attempting that. So again, we spoke strongly to what does improve student achievement, and there's little or no information and research supporting the effect of grade span configurations in any configuration having that outcome. Also, I speak to if the 5 schools would be assigned to grades K to 5, those attending the Samsell Upper Elementary would have certain educational amenities that the remaining 4 do not. And that's because of, as you know, the newness of the facility, the technology advantage, the science advantage with the lab rooms and the presentation rooms, the arts and the music areas. are of a caliber that the schools built in the 50s and prior simply do not have without a major investment in bringing those schools up to that standard. So, and also, I inquired regarding the referendum that was passed to expand the Sam's Hill School and make it what it is today, and that typically when we expand the school and provide all of those wonderful educational opportunities facility-wise, all the students in the community go through grades 4 and 5 and benefit from those amenities. So that's always a good thing. I've made that point in referendums that I've been involved in, and it's a good thing if all students get that. And what concerned us in this report is to go to the 1 through 5 would just create some disparities in educational opportunity based on the facilities. So, barring, of course, as I said, a large investment to address that. We took a brief look at neighborhood schools, and again, we found little research that supports and studies the effect of a neighborhood school on student achievement. So absent that, we cannot say that the neighborhood concept in one way or another affects student achievement. It goes back to the elements that do affect positive learning, positive student outcomes, and success in learning. That the mere proximity of the school to where the students live, again, does not have that effect. It may be convenient for other reasons, but not for the purpose for which we undertook the study. The more sections of elementary grade level, the more manageable it is to staff that grade level in terms of determining class size. And by that, if you go to a K-5 arrangement, you will have stretched the capacity of the building so you'll only have a couple of sections, 2, 3, maybe 4 sections depending on the school, compared to fewer grades will give you more sections. When you do the math, you can manage class size and the number of teachers when you do your staffing that can easily step down the number of students on the average per grade. And that's an important management tool, and that is something that is an advantage. It's not a critical advantage, but it is an advantage worth mentioning. If and when consideration of reopening the Slover building occurs, the administration should do so with a suggested lead time and planning window of 12 to 18 months. So if and when you decide to do that, we really are recommending ample planning time, ample study, ample professional services such as your architect involved in that and assessing any change such as that. Student enrollment trends in community residential development should be carefully and regularly monitored by the administration. Naturally, we took a look at the Whitehall study, concurred with the outcomes of that demographic projection, but because we are on the cusp of expanding residential development in this community, I mentioned the point in the study, if and when that happens, then of course, as we all know, as the residents all know, we will have a spurt in the population of the school. So with that, the Slover facility is certainly a facility asset and one that needs to be explored and assessed in terms of its cost of preparing to reopen. A lot of study will have to be done in terms of the number of classrooms, the fit in it with administration in that building or not. And we also know that anytime you want to address the facility in terms of student occupancy, I know we have a small number of students there now. Always it's advised, and I know the administration knows this, is to consult with County Superintendent of Schools, County Business Administrator. We certainly follow their guidelines as well. It's very doable when you can follow that recommendation. And then also, when major change initiatives are contemplated involving the stakeholders early in the process is almost always a good idea. So any big change you have that when you decide to do it, particularly as students become and press those limitations of facilities, then the recommendation, Dr. Antunes' research and much of my experience certainly demonstrates that, and I know you know that well here as well. So we share, I certainly share that viewpoint. So with that, I'm happy to field any questions you have. Essentially, the study says right now the current arrangement grades K to 3 and the 4-5 Sam Cassell Upper Elementary School is the recommendation not to change that, to remain as is.
Okay, I'll open it up to board members with any questions. Mr. McEnroe?
I think it was Dr. Anthony, you had mentioned in your opening statements about the principles of student learning that you believe that are solid, and I think anybody in education would agree that the big factor is who's standing in front of the chalkboard. I think that's an accepted thing. I know we've been at this a while in this district, and of course my research hasn't been as extensive as yours from the educational piece. There aren't a lot of studies out there that talk about grade span and what's better, but there were a lot of studies I saw out there about school population size, the number of students in the building. Can you talk with that and what you found?
We know that the teacher-student ratio matters, and the fewer students in a given class, there is a correlation to higher achievement. The question will be, in the state of New Jersey and throughout the country, we talk about a thorough and efficient education. So we have to consider the breakpoint of what a class size is that you can responsibly put together and staff. That's one reason I addressed the notion of how can you manage that class size with more sections in a school, in a grade. You can add a teacher and subtract a teacher and control class size. In the other environment, it jumps, for example, from 18 to 23 or 4, just by adding or subtracting one teacher, whichever way you go. That's harder to manage. So yes, indeed, that does. The question is, though, at what point does it start to diminish in student outcomes? I can tell you from my experience and research that there is a correlation between the age of the student, the developmental readiness. I can tell you that 6th, 7th, 8th graders, 9th graders, and high school students can handle larger class sizes better than 4, 3, 2, 1. So you look at the developmental continuum and you realize that if I'm dealing with 4th, 5th, 6th graders, I'm not so concerned if I have 24. I'd rather have 18, but we can handle 24. And I looked at the class sizes, and they're very typically here in Sayreville, 23s, average 23 and a half, as my tables demonstrate. And you can be effective. So if you think you're going to go down to 17, 16, 15, 14, then you lose your efficiency. That'd be wonderful, but you lose your efficiency. So, and you don't have the space for it. So I hope I answered your question, that in that window between typically 19, I always try and give my first graders, by the way, the best advantage I can in terms of smaller class size. If my facility will accommodate it and my budget, I try and get a little edge to first graders for that foundational year. And then in 2nd grade, 3rd grade, I'm more tolerant in the size of the class being acceptable for teaching and learning and achievement. Thank you.
Any other board members with questions? Mrs. Backup?
One of the, and some of the things that you had mentioned, one of the issues too, you have here, which we get a report every month of our enrollment in each building. And however, you didn't put the capacity, so just as an example, and I just want to know if you looked at this, on page 14 you have like the Arleth has an enrollment of 489, that capacity is over 650. Did you look at any sort of reconfiguration within our district to improve overcrowding based on the capacities of the building?
Right, I looked at the long-range building facility plan and understood that. You might notice in there what we call the Herman effect. I don't know if you read that section. That's researcher Jerry Herman talked about how buildings shrink in time because you add programs.
Right.
So when you add basic skills and then you add an arts program to an older building that wasn't designed that way, you usually end up robbing fundamental classrooms for which it was designed 50 or 60 or more years ago. So with that, that has an effect on the capacity. So yes, I have lots and lots of Excel worksheets where I did look at that and conclude that, as I said in the report, the Eisenhower School is under stress, And the Truman School, we're taking a look at the open space area, see if we can manage that perhaps. So I do have a look at the overall capacities of the building and conclude that they're in reasonable alignment now. But that's why I say it's so important to monitor growth that's coming in so you can react to that.
Right, but back to that, Herman, the Arleth addition is not 50 years old, and that building had held a capacity of 6-something actually when the addition was put on, and we brought in a lot of special education
Right.
students. So did you look at that building at all as to whether it can house more students? I mean, we're back to, at 489, the capacity pre-construction.
Yes, I have those, that work done in the background of working it all up, and I conclude with a number of general classrooms available, that's where I come out as the capacity. We're down.
You also didn't mention anything in here about, which was one of the things we did consider, is putting an addition somewhere. And Eisenhower would have been the logical choice. Did you look at whether that was a feasible option?
I did not, because that was beyond the scope of the study to look at your options for expanding and solving those problems, which facility would get which treatment in terms of that. My primary duty was to look at the effectiveness of K5 versus K3.
Well, if we go back to the original of what we were looking to do, one of the questions that the committee had asked of you was to come up with a solution within a fiscal responsible way and based on the resources we have available. And I know you weren't here, but one of the things that I had asked when we first decided to do this was for a cost analysis, which is something this board has not received since we started this process. Can we build onto Eisenhower? Can we open Salover? Should we restructure? What are the costs based in every scenario, and what can we afford to do? Because frankly, we understand that student achievement, and we knew that as a committee, is the highest priority, but we do have financial constraints of what we would be able to do. Did you look at the financial constraints and what the best option would be?
That is why I recommend that you get an architect that has a strong and solid school construction and assessment background. Because again, that was beyond the scope, but I do recognize that will be the solution to your problem, and how you do it is a tremendous responsibility of how you address the oncoming students when this growth spurt comes. And therefore, we talk about community involvement, we talk about professional services such as your architect, we talk about planning and analysis of the spaces, how you disperse special education. There's 100 different ways to do that. And that was beyond the scope of the study, but I do recommend in this study that you get the professional assistance you need to assess that. And particularly if you're going to deploy the Salover School, then how will you do that? That was, again, beyond the scope of my assignment, but that you get the professional services and involve the community stakeholders are, in my opinion and recommendation, the two primary ingredients.
Well, it was my understanding that I thought we were going to get some sort of cost analysis in this.
Well,
in this
the question would be, which analysis? So would an addition on one building, constructing a new building, shutting down a Salover, or opening it up and all the costs, that is not even my expertise. It is the expertise of the architect to say to you, these spaces are obsolete, or they need to be increased, or the roof condition, and all the costs that go into that. So it's a structural analysis of a given building.
Right, but when I read this report, I mean, in all 42 pages, it looks to me that the basic recommendation is to reopen Salover as a neighborhood school or whatever, but there still are no costs associated with that. And is it economically feasible, and can we do it within our current budget process the way we have it now? Because it is a small building, so it will not house. And I remember when we looked, we were told that there aren't enough children in the immediate area, so we would be busing students actually outside that immediate neighborhood into that building. But you didn't look at any of that.
No, my recommendation is that is a different study than the one that was conducted, because which cost analysis? Is it the cost analysis to open a Salover K to 5. If that's the case, then you have to have the programmatic amenities to do that. If it's a K to 3, you may not need the science and the and technology for the higher grades. If you decide to make it a special education facility within the parameters of the law, in treating them accordingly, then that's a different model with different facility needs and that. So what it is you want to do with the building will drive that assessment, and there are a dozen ways you could use that.
I did notice you mentioned that about special education, so were you saying in here that that building can house a special education school?
Within the parameters of the law.
Which is?
You can address that or 10 as well. That could be another consideration for the use of the building, or especially concentration, or we also talked about returning students from out of district that you would consider. So again, it's a Rubik's Cube, and there are many ways to turn it. And every time you turn it a different way, you have a different cost analysis.
Okay. No, because you did mention that it can be done in the parameters of the law.
Yes, ma'am.
And that wasn't something that we had looked at before.
Okay.
Just as a follow-up to one of Mrs. Batko's questions, and I think as a board, we decided to hold off on the cost estimates for, like, for example, for Slover, for Sampson, until we figured out what we were going to do. But in terms of like the student achievement aspect of it, if you look at reopening a Slover versus putting an addition onto Eisenhower, with the size of the school that's already in place, the size that Slover would be, do you have any opinion from a student achievement perspective, which would be the better route to go? Aside from the cost, that's a whole separate.
Right, and I think Dr. Antunes was really clear about the ingredients of effective schooling. They're in the report. I can tell you, if you go all the way back to the Carnegie report in the 80s, it talks about when you get into really large facilities, that you talk about schools within schools and learning communities. We talk about PLCs. They are additional ingredients to handling the large capacity school.
And what is defined as a large capacity school at an elementary level?
We typically, my opinion, because you said large, and in my opinion, to answer your question on large, when you start to cross over 500, that's getting to be large. But the upper elementary school is certainly a large school as it's designed now. It's very large. So you have to give a great deal of consideration in that environment to the schools within schools, the team approach, having teachers collaborate, work together, the PLCs. A lot of planning goes into that. And I know that in Saraville, you're doing a very good job in terms of understanding. For the immediate future, meaning next school year. Beyond that, I don't know. And I say that's why I immediately go to the recommendation of monitor this continually and regularly. I do not know, I did not go into the dynamics of the municipality, and that was again beyond the scope, but it was necessary for me to speak to transportation and see where the growth areas were, which I did, and also then to understand if this was on its way and the construction was going up, or just when. So in view of that, immediately means in the forthcoming school year. After that, you have to monitor it for any changes in planning, building permits, and fiscal impact studies and the like. It's really, really important.
And I think, Mrs. Backer, the residential impact at the point is projected to be for the next 5 to 10 years.
5 to 10 years.
But it's coming.
But it's coming.
Yeah, the first meeting for final site approval for planning board is next Wednesday. So it's in motion, and it's not, it's not slowing down.
And that's what I got, that it's exactly that?
Yeah, well, the demographic study I passed you was the one that was done for the planning board master plan, right, that you based that on.
So is it your recommendation, you said 12 to 18 months we should, do this plan? If this is not going to happen for 5 to 10 years, do we account for that in this process, or do we build now and then come back?
Oh, no, you
5 to 10
have
years
to,
later?
I think your schools are stable right now. I know Eisenhower is stressed. I know that. I know you're looking for some solutions. And as I said, there are a number of ways you can do that, a number of different cost factors. And you really need the professional expertise to consider your options. I've led the referendum development process. What if we do this and what if we do that, and brainstorm everything and have the professionals there, and then you get a completely exhaustive list of what your options are. Now you begin to cost it out, talk about community opinion, appetite for spending in a community, and that. So there's a lot to that. But to answer your question further, it's then when you see it coming with that planning window, you need to, you'll have a sense of the permits and when they're coming. And so concurrently, as that starts to happen, start your 18 to 24-month clock, because that's how much time it's going to take to do a good job and not be in a rush situation.
Okay, the other thing you put as a recommendation, which I think is a good one here, it's on page 21 where you put how we should involve people, and you said a community survey to measure the perceptions. So if your recommendation is to say Open Silver School, or we wanted to go out with a survey to get the perception, what type of demographic area would we actually go for, as far as if we wanted to limit the survey and get good feedback?
Right. Typically, there's a domino effect, because I also talked about the transportation software and how you redraw the borders and repopulate the schools. So to do that, if you move one boundary, it could affect other boundaries across the district. I will tell you this about a survey. You have to be very mindful about designing it scientifically and gathering the information you need specifically. Because once you do a survey, it's hard to get a second chance at it. So therefore, it would be very difficult to do just the sellover neighborhood. My advice on that would be to do an entire community survey with a demographic breakdown page in the front. So they would check, I live at this address, or I attend this school, I have these many children, and so on. Then when you get all that data, you can sort it all the ways to give you the answer that you want. So that if you know their address, then you would get from that the ability with computers to sort out and get the opinions of those that are likely to be affected.
Right, because I guess, for example, if we went to, say, the Morgan section and got a survey, and then you went all the way out by, say, Wilson, which you say those people probably might not be affected, and you had them in there, wouldn't that sort of skew the data?
No, because you can sort it and account for that.
Okay, so we should ask them, but sort accordingly.
Yes, and if you miss the opportunity to get all of their demographic information up front, for example, I even do their age group. Are you a student? Are you 20 to 30? Are you 31 to 40? And that tells me too where my grandparent age started, my senior citizens began, and you can do lots of wonderful sorts like that to give you really useful data.
So you're saying we should even give it the survey to people in the community without children?
I always put it online and do that because they're going to have to pay for it. And grandparents care about where their grandchildren.
Yes, but I mean, is your recommendation to give the survey to people that do not have children? I mean, whether they're...
Yes.
So we would just be all encompassing to the entire community?
It's stakeholders, every
So every taxpayer
Every
should be involved
exactly.
in the survey?
The other thing that you can do, which we work together on, is from the survey results that you receive, you can break down and do a phone survey in addition, which may help you pinpoint other questions that you may want to ask from whichever community or all community, however you break it down. And you get very, again, there are services that do this, and that's what we would recommend, but you get, people want to talk, and they will talk to you, and sometimes they'll answer something in a survey paper that they won't answer over the phone, and vice versa. 10 minutes, you call at the right time, and that's what happens. It's not you guys calling, it's not community members calling, it's a service that's doing this for you. And so they've got no stake in this.
So how would you determine who gets that phone call?
Actually, it's random sample, is
Just a
typically what
random
it is, yes.
Mrs. Bloom, I think you had a question?
Yes, what I seem to have gotten from your report was that your recommendation was to move, and correct me if I'm wrong, pre-K, K, perhaps special needs students to the Silova School, which in turn would free up classrooms in the other elementary schools and address the overcrowding. Is that?
No, that's actually, that is an option, but if you do that, then you have to do anything such as the occupancy of special education very carefully and with the parameters of the law. So that's something that I did not recommend it quite as you said, just that the Silova School could be considered for that. I also said that the SAMHSA arrangement is working very well right now for the preschool students, and I really don't see a need to disrupt that necessarily.
So saying both those things, would you agree that if, you know, and again, money not being part of the equation, if we did open Slover School, the best scenario for Slover School would probably be a K-3 school?
That would be congruent, of course, with what you have, and
Right.
it would tend to fit the neighborhood model that we have.
And everyone would still benefit from the UES, the upgrade?
Exactly right. However, I would stop short of saying, but don't rule out looking at all the possible options in the world that there could be.
But if we were to do that one step, just opening Slover, that would be in one step without hurting the.
Yes, and again, your transportation, software and your attendance boundaries are already rather challenging as I looked at the maps.
Okay.
Any other board members with questions?
If we reconfigure, should we look, I mean, people have brought this up, do we look at, say, test scores of individual buildings, like, not to make one building, like, to try to keep them sort of even? Because right now, like, say we have one, we have 4 elementary schools and one was poor performing, and one was high performing. Does that come into the equation at all?
Well, I heard Dr. Antunes say, one of the elements of effective schooling is we believe that all children can learn, and learn at equal opportunities and equal outcomes. So with that, and there's a lot of research on that notion, and so then that goes back to the leadership and the state development, all that comes out of that. So if the school, in any school district in the country, if a given segment of a district or a school is underperforming, they understand why and address that. And that would be the reasons of state development, effective teaching, effective leadership, not so much demographic.
Well, I guess because there was a question when we had a meeting once before, and some people said they want you to make sure that you don't come into and make, like, say, a low-income school versus another, you know, school that would be different. With that, do we have to look at something like that?
There's always consideration of all variables in any outcome, such as Title I designations, income areas of low income, and how you manage that and make certain that you're equitable and fair as you make your design.
Okay, because some of our schools are Title I, but not all.
Is that typically the case? Yeah.
And actually, for the person who does that report, there is a Title I comparability, which makes the district, it's an assurance that the district must provide to the federal government, indicating that those schools are receiving an equitable education as those schools with not socially, economically disadvantaged population. So it's up to the administrators to do that report, and I see that it is done, and you have to do it. You cannot fail that report.
Right, but what are the rules? If we, say we had a building still over and now it has no students, we could just do it demographically. Do you have to look at whether it's going to become a Title I school or not a Title I school?
Because it's formula driven.
Okay.
So once it's taken, whoever the population of the school, the enrollment of the school, the information that you put into the NCLB, Title I application, it's formula driven and it will tell you whether a school is Title I or not.
Just to follow up on that same question, is there an advantage from a district perspective for us to look at that information in terms of how Dr. Alfano, our administration, our teachers, you know, handle student achievement and improve student achievement in the district?
I don't think so. I think that it's information that's important to know. You might have to staff a school differently that has Title I, that's designated as Title I, but all students can learn and should be offered an equitable chance to do that.
Any other board members with questions? Okay, members of the administration, any questions? Okay. Hearing none, I'm going to open it up to public at this time for any questions for the consultants. I'd ask that you limit it to questions, and we will give you a chance, I promise you, before the board takes any action, if you have any opinions you wish to express. Does anyone have any questions for the consultant? Yes?
So I just want to make sure that I walk away tonight with some concrete information. So thank you for your study. I think you do agree that the size of the students and teacher ratio does matter, right? My 8-year-old, she's in Eisenhower. Last month in her grade, there were 27 kids. My older one, she went to the same school 2 years ago, and I see huge difference in the quality of education. How in the world one teacher can manage a test, preparation, homework, etc. for 27 kids. So I hear all the things here. It sounds like a long-term solution, but what can be done on immediate basis so that those kids do not suffer?
Well, that relates to the question that was asked earlier about the correlation between class size and achievement. And when you start to move up over 24, 25, depending on the age of the students and their ability to handle that, and the square footage of the classroom, and whether or not there's an aid assigned, and whether or not they change classes. So there are a number of variables. So my response is that the class size is important, and when you're moving up into those upper 20s, it's something that you need to give great consideration to about finding solutions for lower class size.
But that finding the solution is not going to happen overnight or next couple of months, right? So we are talking about, like, let's say, probably a year and a half to 2 years, right? So, yeah, or even longer than that. So do we let these kids suffer, which is like, I consider kindergarten, third is the foundation of the study as kids move along the way, right? So
I can tell you this, and I didn't study this, but I can tell you from my experience that minor changes in boundaries to manage school population, in my experience, is in order. That's not necessarily redistricting, but it is saying, you know what, we have an overcrowded situation in this school. If we push the boundary a little bit, we can make an annual adjustment. Now, I don't know if that's the practice here, but in my experience, that helps alleviate the problem to repopulate the schools within reason without disrupting the community and where the vast majority of the kids go to school. That's one tool you can use. There's also additional staffing. That's a budgetary issue. Also, one thing that happens is we watch, and I took a look at this, how much art on a cart do we have? How many of the schools have a dedicated art room, a dedicated music room? And when you start to see overcrowding occur, typically the way we respond to that before we can have a construction solution is we take away the art room and make it into a classroom. And then the art teacher's on a cart. The art teacher's not happy, the principal's not happy, and it's not the best art experience, but we want them to have that. When you see that happening, that's a major flag. We accepted your viewpoint that 27 was too many and had a solution without construction. We took advantage of that art classroom and made it a regular classroom. Therefore, we added a teacher, lowered the class size across the board, but we had to spend money to do it and have the money in the budget and accommodate that and staff that building and address those issues. It's a complex matter. I agree with the question that class size, when you get to those kind of numbers, are difficult, especially if you don't have the square footage. They're the things we consider when we look to solve that problem.
yeah, but I understand we operate the fullest, all the buildings are on the maximum, I guess, we have enough classrooms, but I guess, so what do we do on an interim basis so that these kids do not suffer? I guess that's the question for everybody up here.
Right, and that's where I say you need to look and involve your professionals and put an effort together that seeks solutions. And a lot of times they're not pleasant solutions. So the only way you can bring down class size is have more sections.
So those are things that we would need to address here in terms of the actions we want to take. He's given you a variety of options that we could do. That would be up to us and to Dr. Alfano to decide which combination of those would work to give you an immediate solution.
And I just like to say, I might not be able to make you feel better right now, but my son is a second grader at Eisenhower School, so I know exactly where you're coming from. I agree with you 100%, but I think he just gave us a couple options where maybe we can move some people around, get more staff. I can't promise any stuff, but I can promise you that I won't let what you just said be forgotten by this board. And I'll continue to bring it up because I have 2 other kids coming up too. So I'm in the same boat as you right now. And it matters to me, and I wish I could give you an answer right now, and I'm sure everybody could. But I want you to know that, no, I'm not looking at a 2-year. I mean, there might be a 2-year problem to solve the overall problem, but I think hopefully we can find something to solve that right now.
Right, I'm not looking for answer at this moment. I think my point is here, I know we keep having all these discussions right now, right? I think when decisions are being made, right? So I know when my older one was in first, second grade, when she had a class size of 24 kids,
Sure.
her teacher had a helper teacher. My younger one, she had 27 kids, she doesn't have a helper teacher. So I think those things need to be looked at this way.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, hearing none, thank you very much. I would appreciate it if both of you would stay yet, because we may have some more questions as our dialogue goes on.
Of course.
But thank you very much for your
Pleasure to
presentation.
serve you. Thank you as well.
Thank you. All right, at this time, I will take a motion to acknowledge receipt of the redistricting study by Dr. Bowen and Dr. Antunes. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
By Mrs. DePinto, second by Mrs. Bloom. Any remarks? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Let me try that again. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Number 6, does the board require any additional information, whether it be from the study or in terms of preparing us for next steps we want to take? I'm looking to get a feel from the board as to what additional information we're going to need in terms to bring this to closure. Mrs. Bloom?
Well, I think, off of what was said, we're certainly going to need some architect information to see what's going to be needed to bring Slover up to the level that we need it to be at if we want to go that route. So I think we need to move forward with some other studies to see where we need to go.
Okay, so you're proposing a architectural study in terms of opening Slover.
That
Do
was
we want
the
to?
most reasonable thing to do.
Do we want to limit it to just Slover? Do we want to look at other options such as an addition to Eisenhower?
Right, we would.
You might want to get, a study on that too, but wouldn't that have to go out for referendum vote?
If we were to do an addition to Eisenhower, most likely that would require a referendum due to the size of the funding that's required. And Slover may as well, depending on the funding, but it's probably a lot less likely.
It's all gonna come down to the actual size of the project you're doing. That's how you move forward.
Thoughts?
I just have another question.
They're here.
Mr. Bowen? When we had discussed one of the options as an addition onto Eisenhower, and I don't know, you're the facility person, so hopefully you can answer this. One of the issues that came up actually in the school, and speaking to the principal, the current one, the former one of the problems we have there is the volume in the morning, say for drop-off or pick-up, and the actual traffic and based on its location. For that purpose, is it feasible to add an addition to that building, and how many more students could we house based on its location and the traffic?
That is where your civil engineer, department of the architect, comes into play. They look at the capacities of the road, the traffic study. The traffic study is very important as a precursor to those decisions.
Because some people say like the building, even if we have the physical space to add on, but it might not be optimal.
That's exactly right. So traffic studies go hand in hand with this decision making, and a qualified architect will have that in-house or sub it out.
Okay. Just to add on this, if worst case scenario, let's just say the civil engineer, whoever it is, says it's probably not a good idea to add onto the building just for sheer size, it'll be too big and it won't. Is there any other building that we could do that? Say, for example, whether it be Wilson or Truman, is there any other physical, is it worth looking at another building to do that?
I'm gonna say Wilson, you have the playground to the if you're standing to the right of you, you have that large playground area, parking lot. I'd say probably no to Truman because it sits up on the hill with the new development behind it. Olive, you basically built out, there is some space to the left of the building where the playground is. And Slover actually has that large playground area and fields behind it that are there. So, those are
Is there
the
any
only-
way you could build up anywhere as opposed to out? Do you think any of those buildings?
You would have to look at your zoning laws and all that if you can build on top of them. Can the structures actually handle a second floor? Sometimes people think, oh, the first floor, just put the second floor, but the structural beams and everything cannot carry that additional load, and now you're building beams to hold the second floor and things of that nature.
If we were going to look at the point in our long-term plan, I don't think that Slover even opening it is going to cut it. So if we had to broaden the scope, would we consider to do that now?
I mean, I know from the discussions we had about 2 years ago when the point first came up, the number of students that they're predicting out of that development is not something that I think would warrant a brand new school. If I remember the number that they were talking.
And I remember when they built the townhomes, they didn't predict the number of students that came out of them. So
Now,
I
at
think we need to
Lemaire,
be careful.
from my understanding, Lemaire has always been told that you're going to get the number of students. I mean,
I'm talking private, previous to
because
that.
I mean, my understanding is the point are going to be luxury condominiums, studio 1 and 2 bedrooms along the waterfront. I'm going to tell you my knowledge and my experience, you're probably not going to get families that are going to move into that type of environment for that dollar value, but that remains to be seen.
But Mike, has there been any change?
I was just gonna say,
I thought
Mr.
there was-
McEnon's on the planning board,
Yeah, was
if you
there
can give us
any
an update or any insights that you have.
Well, first of all, I don't believe what a developer tells me as far as how many school-aged children are gonna come out of an area. Here's the problem with any development, and we've experienced this in town, when something is spread out over 10 years, there's a lot of time, a lot of room for things to change. We do know that next Wednesday, the first part of phase 1 of the point is coming before the planning board for final site approval, and that is the Bass Pro. And that is the build it and they will come. That's the anchor of this whole parcel. This is a building that's 5 acres under roof. And then they're gonna start phasing in developments and start building businesses, malls, and then residents, okay? Who knows if we're ever gonna see the 2,000 units. Now, since I've been on the planning board longer than I've been in head, that number has changed every presentation. Whether it's gonna be 3-bedroom, 2-bedroom, or 1-bedroom. I would argue if it's a 1-bedroom residence in a development like that, you're probably not gonna drive children. But if you're building 3 bedrooms, you're attracting people with children, and that's my experience. And it's the same story when Town Lake was going up. Oh, that's not gonna, we have 5-bedroom homes there, so. And don't forget about what's happened, and it could happen at the point that these developments that went in specifically for age restricted, that was lifted, and now is out the market value, which drove in families. So, my big concern is that we're not sitting here not doing anything, and then 5 years later, these residents come in, and we're sitting here saying, what are we gonna do, when we know that now?
Right.
That's always been my concern, is being proactive versus being reactive. And that's the big issue. It's good that I'm on the plan because I have some insight, and I ask those questions that maybe would not have been asked about the impact of children, school aids that's going to be in the district. I know with the economic redevelopment plan that the borough has approved, it is in there. And I know I can't use the word impact fee because in the state of New Jersey you can't assess those, but the developer has agreed to provide $19 million to the school district as part of his development. When that comes and what shape that comes is to be seen as well. Certainly it's not enough money, but it's better than zero. So all those things are factors. It's a moving target. I'll know more Wednesday. So maybe at the next board meeting, I'll have an update. Because once they come before the planning board and it's approved and it's put into a resolution, then they're obligated to do that. So I'll know more.
Mr. Syke, if I could address one thing that Mr. Walsh brought up earlier, and Dr. Bowen did. If we go back, if you recall when we were first looking at these studies, Mrs. Shedlock and I did look at Slover School and a way to restructure our boundaries. And if I recall correctly, we were able to restructure some of the boundaries to almost include close to 300 kids in that building. And it almost gave relief, immediate relief to Eisenhower, and it also gave some relief to, I believe, Truman and Olive when we looked at it, because we were pulling kids, students off of Bordentown Avenue, parts of Melrose and things of that nature. So we looked at it. Dr. Alfano and I looked, and we feel that that building probably holds somewhere between 275 to 325 kids, depending on class size and what we do in there. So just so you know, Mr. Walsh, we have looked at that as one of the things. And again, is it an exact science? No. We moved this block over. How many kids did we pick up? Now, that was done 2 years ago. Those same kids can now be actually already at the UES, so they're no longer going to wind up in that school. So it's a point in time that you do the study to give you an idea of how many kids that you have. But we've looked at that using the software package that we have. So those things are things that we have explored at one time, and I still have those maps in my office, the color-coded ones and all that, so.
So I'm hearing a desire for some information on Slover. I'm hearing a possible desire and addition for Eisenhower. Let's look at the reverse. At K-5, is there still any interest on the part of the board at exploring that?
I think we might want to at least get a cost estimate to see the difference between the three.
Well, and I think we're gonna go back to what Dr. Bowen said. What are you looking at when you say K-5? Are you looking to do a study to make all K-5 buildings equal to the UES status of the K-5? With the media center, the art center, the music center? That's one study. Or are you just looking to do the renovation to make it K-5 friendly? So it's more than just saying, I want a K-5. What configuration do you want? What options do you want in that? Because that drives the cost of the study also. So you just can't say, I want a K-5 building. What level of a K-5 building are you looking at?
The one other thing, and I know Mrs. Rakuya brought it up, and we sort of scrapped it at the time, but if we're going to look at this in a very long range, and I know she had brought up, well, what if we just knocked down Slover and built a new building, and we looked at the cost, well, that would be prohibitive. But if we're going to include the point, and if that capacity of Slover cannot accommodate the current enrollment growth and the point, then long range, we might need, would it be feasible for us to dump all this money into Slover now to find out in 5 years we do need a second floor on the building?
I'm gonna say geographically, I don't think Slover
And the
would
point.
be, Slover and the Point would be the two connecting
Right,
schools.
well, I get that, but that's the only place you're telling me we really can build, because other than put addition on Eisenhower, you said the other three schools really
Unless
are
you're
not.
going out, or,
Right.
again, could you build on top of Truman? That's something that an architect would have to tell you if you're structurally sound to
No,
do
my
that.
fear is that we put all this money into Slover to renovate and find out we still need more space, and if Slover's the only location where you feel we can do it, we might want to get a long-range cost based on the number of students, and I mean, maybe after Wednesday we'll have a better idea how many students.
And
that
again,
is.
you may be looking at redistricting, that the kids that are currently at Truman may be the ones going more to Slover, because geographically, to take kids from the Point.
Right, I wasn't talking about moving kids from the.
No, I know, I'm not
looking
saying
at total enrollment.
So if you're saying that, I would say then you may need to explore the Truman School, which we had that open space concept with no walls between. Maybe that's really the school that you focus in on and not Slover.
I thought we
Is-
were going away from that anyway. the
Well, we
Truman
haven't done that, that's what I'm saying, that's an option
That's
that we
also-
talked about. Instead of putting up the walls, you look at a long-range plan, that
Right.
if the Point is gonna produce 300 kids, 400 kids, that to me is more geographically in sync to where the Point is, or even Olive, they're remote, they're really close to each other. So, yeah, you have to start, as Dr. Bowen said, you have to move your boundaries and say, okay, if we move over 5 blocks this way, how many kids do we take out of Truman and put into Olive? We always move the boundaries at Winding Woods, when we have growth population, problems with population. We moved 2 buildings over, and that freed up 50 kids from one school to put them in another. Those are the kind of things you have to really start to look at before you say, do we get a construction estimate for Slover? Do we get a construction estimate for Truman? You have to first determine where do you think that concentration is going to be, or can you move the boundaries and make the necessary changes without doing the construction? You indicated at one time Olive had 650 kids. If we have room for 150, is there really a need to build at this point in time? If you can fit 300 at Slover and 150 at Olive, that's 450 students. Are we really experiencing that kind of growth, and will we experience that kind of growth with the Point? So again, you have to think of different options before you say, let's build here, build there. You might want to look at moving some boundaries.
Right, but I thought this study was going to give us that answer, that exact answer that you were talking about. Well, if we have capacity here, could we
No,
construct
that's-
currently what we have?
If you recall, at the same time, the night that we approved Dr. Bowen, We tabled the architectural. We tabled the architectural.
Because we weren't sure what the student achievement
Exactly.
piece would
Exactly,
yield.
that's the key that why we.
Also, I think the first thing we need to do is turn the heat back on in here if at all possible, because I think, I'm not done yet.
Listen, I'll show you the text.
Mr. McEnroe, what are your
Came
thoughts on
on, it
this?
came off, I can't control
It did come on, if we could turn it back on, it would be helpful. Mr.
I'm
McEnroe,
gonna have
what
to
are your
get
thoughts?
programmed into my phone.
What are my thoughts?
Yeah.
My thoughts is, before this, the time this board makes a decision, current kindergartens will be beyond the 5th grade.
They'll be in 2030.
Well, we've been talking about this for well over 3 years. The first question in my mind is, and I've been very vocal about this, I've been very opinionated on what we should do. I think Mr. Burns, who I consider one of the sages of the district, had made a comment at one of our earlier meetings when we talked about redistricting that if we were going to build a district from start, we would have K through 5 schools. I think, that's the paradigm out there. That seems to be configurations, the majority of configurations. But that's not what we have here in Sabre. We have a school sitting on the highway that we put a lot of money into that was built for 4th and 5th graders, kids that school age. I don't know that school from a parent perspective because my kids were older when that school opened up. But I spend a lot of time in the UES, more so than any other school. And I'm here to tell you that that's a very professional staff. There's a lot of collaboration going on there. And it's a very well-managed, led school. I like to see it continue that way because that school has those things that Dr. Bowen spoke about in his report that are unique to that building. And I will agree that there are inequities in the elementary schools already, but we will exacerbate it by limiting the exposure of our students to that building that we invested. So the first question I think the board needs to do is what does our grade configuration look like? Once we determine that, then how are we going to handle the overcrowding that's going to be there no matter what we do with the UES? Now, we have Slover School, and Slover School is a school, and there was a lot of public concern that we do not lose that as a school. We have that building, and why we are not investing in that building every year, putting $1 million plus into there to get that school ready so that when this splurge of enrollment comes, we're not sitting here looking like idiots because you've been talking about this for so many years and now you can't have a place to kids. The building exists. Let's utilize that. Now, we're sitting in a room with some of us on the board remember the angst of this thing being built. If anybody is supposing that we build something onto Eisenhower, wait until I'm gone, because I could imagine, I'm not a structural engineer, I'm not an architect, but I will tell you that's going to be more costly than the taking Slover and putting some heat, new windows in there, putting some paint in there, and taking the administrative staff out of it. Regardless what we do, we need Slover. Okay? Now, if the point doesn't generate more than 350 kids, which I would say from my experience on the planning board and looking at demographic studies, you're probably looking at between 200 and 300 kids, depending on the market value of those things and the number of bedrooms. And I will force my position on the planning board to see if we can get a configuration that is palatable and both advantageous to us. But I always use this term, it's a military term, that we practically, we do this to ourselves. We're looking at doing more studies. And people are sitting there saying, this is the third meeting I've come to, and you guys are still talking about studies. Let's make a decision here. Okay, I propose that we keep the district the way it is. It's a 4-5 school. It's working, leave it as is. Let's start investing money into Slover. The gentleman's concern, which is a very accurate concern, and I share Mr. Walsh's opinion, that we can do things right now that don't cost anybody any money to fix Eisenhower. Dr. Alfano and I talked about that, but this coming September, we can take that software you said, draw that circle maybe a little smaller, and take some of those students and put them in some of the space at Arlett, put them in other districts to relieve that school right now. At the same time, having the 2030 Infrastructure Committee to take a look at Slover and how much money we have that we can put in capital reserve to start getting Slover up to speed. It's about time we just make that decision, stop kicking the can down the road. I feel like I'm sitting in Washington, D.C. I mean, you asked me what I thought, and I just thought I'd tell you that.
So following up on that, because I would like to open it up to public and then hopefully take a couple of votes to do something. I don't know what that's going to be yet, but take a couple of votes. Does anyone have any ideas or information requests that we have not yet considered. We've got looking at Eisenhower and putting an addition on that. We've still got looking at the K-5 for the UES. We've still got Slover School out there as well. Any other ideas that we haven't considered before I open the public?
Well, those aren't definite.
No, none of those are definites, but I don't want to open up the public and then have something that we vote on not be something they've had a chance to have
Because I
feedback.
think we beat this horse.
I would agree. Okay, so the horse is dead, we're going to dismount. And I'm going to open it up to public now for any comments that anyone has concerning this item.
Hi. You saved me a lot of time because most of the stuff you said, that's what I was.
If you could just give us your name and
Carmen
address.
Melendez, I'm sorry, I live in 18 Driftwood Drive, Harlem, New Jersey.
Thank you.
All the stuff you said was kind of half what I was going to say. It's very frustrating. I have been coming to these meetings for about the last 3 years. I don't come to every meeting. I come maybe two, 3 meetings a year. But I feel like I'm at the same meeting that I was at 3 years ago when my son was in first grade. And now he's in UES and my daughter's in kindergarten. And like he said, 27 children, it's a lot. I have a question, I don't know if you guys can answer it. But from what I understood, maybe it has to do with the grade. I thought after 25 children, if it was more than that, there would be a second teacher in the classroom. Is that correct?
No, only for
in
kindergarten?
Now, just as an idea, as a quick fix solution, I know it's gonna cost money, but could that be something that can be looked at as well? This is not gonna fix the overcrowding, but it can help parents like us that have children in the classroom that are in the kindergarten and have so many kids in the classroom, of adding an additional teacher for the older grade as well, at least in elementary, that that'll help them, because if there's another teacher in the classroom, obviously you can do a lot more if you have help. I'm a teacher myself, but I teach preschool. The other idea was, right now my son's in UES, and he's in a class where all the children in his class are in TAG. And then the other class is a mixture of students. I've often wondered why things change, because I remember when I was little, I started in 1-3, then I went to 2-2, then I was in 3-1, 4-1, 5-1, and it was based on levels. I've always wondered why that's changed, and I'm wondering if maybe if we went back to that. I don't know why my son's in that class. I don't know if that's a test that's being done by the Board of Ed, or I don't know. I don't understand, because I thought the whole school was like that, and then I realized that he's one of the few, if not the only one. But technically, if you have, let's say, 30 children that are, excelling, and you put them with one teacher, they may tend to be able to handle things on their own more independently. Whereas if you have 30 students of children that have lower levels, then they will require the second teacher because they're going to need a little more assistance. So I'm wondering, maybe is that something that can be looked at too? Maybe we can change the way we do the classrooms, and then the classes that have children that aren't achieving as high or that need extra help will have that extra staff person, and then the children that are excelling, that are a little more independent and can work on their own better, one teacher is sufficient. Like you said, with the studies, it's like, I want to hear about more studies. And no offense to you, but how much money do we spend on all these studies? Like, all this money that we're spending on studies, we should have spent on the architect to find out how much it costs to fix Sellover and get it done. Like, every year I'm like, oh, good, we got a solution. Sellover's gonna open. Oh, we're gonna do K-5. Got all excited. My son and daughter, all my kids are 4 years apart. So I'm like, oh, they'll be in the school for 1 year. That got killed. So I'm like, what's gonna happen? Like, my daughter's in kindergarten. I got my other one. She's starting preschool next year. It's like, is it gonna happen when they're all graduated and I have them in school, or is this actually something gonna happen? So at this point, it's like, we gotta make a decision. I'm like sick of hearing about studies and studies and studies. It's not, the studies, we're spending money on studies, spending money on studies, it's not, nothing's getting done. And it's very frustrating as a parent. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else for public? I probably summed up a lot of comments. Yes, please come to the microphone if you don't mind.
If you don't wish to be,
if you don't want to be photographed, we don't have to photograph you. Just come to the microphone. We won't photograph you, but please come to the microphone.
Leave the camera on.
Hi, my name is Felicia Robinson. I live on Kendall Drive in Parkland, and I just have a question. I hope the board isn't considering using spillover as a special needs school only.
There's really been no talk of that at this point.
Because I heard that that was part of the study and then you had questions on it.
Yeah, it was
But I'm just
mentioned.
hoping.
It was mentioned as part of the study, but we've never had, at least up until this point, a discussion about doing that.
So that's not a consideration.
Not at this time, no.
That's my only question. Thank you.
And see, you were ready for prime time. Anyone else for public? Okay, we'll close public at this time. I'm going to follow Mr. McEnroe's lead and see if we can put to bed first the grade configuration issue, because I think that one may...
I'd like to make a motion that the Board of Ed finally resolve this issue, that we keep the grade configuration in the district as it resides today.
Which would be, okay, that's fine. I have a motion, do I have a second? I have a second by Mrs. Strapp. Okay, comments on the motion? Okay, hearing none, roll.
Can we afford that? That's the question. I mean, can we afford to do that?
We already do, right?
It doesn't, we have to,
Open, slow, in other words, open slow.
Well, no.
no, this is just to keep the grade configuration. Okay.
Okay, any other comments? Hearing none, roll call.
Mr. Balka,
Yes.
Mrs. Backman,
Yes.
I'm sorry,
Yes.
Mrs. Bloom,
Yes.
Mr. Brzezinski,
Yes.
Mrs. DePinto,
Yes.
Mr. McEnroe,
I vote yes.
Mrs. Trapp,
Yes.
and Mr. Walsh,
Yes.
and Mr. Sires.
Yes, we made a decision. Okay, and that might be enough for today, I don't know, but I'm going to take another shot at this. So now we have the issue of the overcrowding at Eisenhower, and we're looking for at least a medium term, if not an immediate solution. Where do we want to go with that? What information do we need that we want to proceed with?
Well, Dr. Alfano, I wish I had my ADA report here, but the recent report you sent out about the population in the schools, anybody have a recent copy with them right
It's
now?
gone up about 1.5%.
Right. I know in the UES right now, there's like 1,008 in the latest report. But we right now, correct me if I'm wrong, and video, here we go. This coming September, and even the following September, the 15-16 school year, we have the capacity in the district right now to relieve some of Eisenhower by doing, and it's not like Dr. Bowen's not a redistricting, but a relocation, perhaps of some students. We need to take a look at that to relieve some of that issue there. And then, as I can feed information to the board about what the configuration of the point is going to be and how they're going to phase that in and out, there you go. Yeah.
So now,
I think this is a double question, and we've been saying this, beating this horse again. We need to look at Slover. You have a building that's sitting there that has the capacity to fill 325 kids. Let's get an architect in there. We have 7 classrooms ready now. By September, we'll have 9 or 10. We could talk about looking at phasing in some of those classrooms over a 2-year period, starting either this September or the following September. But certainly, we would need to do some work on the building, to the heating system, and some of the other things. And then we can reconfigure based on filling that building. You understand, if we're going to move boundaries, we might as well look at, filtering some of those kids in, or wait till the 15-16 school year, really renovate the building, and fill that building to, well, not the capacity, but to about 30 or 300 or so students, 275. We also have to do another study, which we discussed as well, is what is it going to cost to house that building? What is it going to cost from a personnel perspective to do that? All right, so obviously you could filter some teachers from other buildings, but to eliminate overcrowding by moving students from one building to another and not increasing staff, you're defeating the purpose. So my assumption is you're probably going to need, if you have, say, 15 classrooms in that building, I would say probably 10 of those classrooms you're going to need new teachers to alleviate some of the overcrowding. You're going to need a nurse, you're going to need an administrator, you're going to need custodians, you're going to need those types of...
those costs are the same whether we add something to Eisenhower or we.
But that's what I'm saying.
Right, we need to know what they are.
But I'm saying, if we're gonna open up Slover, these are the immediate things we need to do. And we need to know when we wanna open up Slover.
Now, that's coming from this way.
I mean, we don't have to do that tonight, but that's something
Correct.
we can take a
But
look at.
let's look at this in parts. First of all, when you're saying we need to do a study in terms of staffing and the costs, that's something you and your team can do, correct? We don't need to hire a consultant.
Well, you have to let us know what you wanna do.
Correct, but that's something that you guys can do.
Right, you did the first step. We know it's gonna be a K-3 school.
Correct.
So we'll concentrate on it being a K-3 school. The next thing we need to know is when you want it opened. Okay, and then it obviously will determine whether we're gonna open in phases or we're gonna open it up all in one shot. You're either gonna open it up in September 2014 or you're gonna open up September 2015.
And I'm gonna take a guess right now and say that part of what will dictate when we open it is the amount of money it's gonna take to get it ready. Because if we can fund it all this year and get it all done, we can open it in September.
It's not gonna happen funding all in one shot.
So then
Well, we
that's
have
gonna
to fund it
dictate,
over a period of time.
so we've answered our own question.
So what's happening is that right now we have 7 refurbished classrooms waiting, and we're doing 2 or 3 more. Matter of fact, we talked to Mr. Pantaleano today, that half of this building would be ready to go. The problem is we would have to do some HVAC, we would have to do some electric, we would have to take a look at the roof. Those are the basics that we would have to do before we can open up. And how do we do it? Do we phase it in? We need to know that. If you rather, the easiest thing to do, from your perspective, is just to go and wait till September 2015 and fill the building. But that's not going to alleviate a lot of the overcrowding next year. So it's something that, we've been kicking, like we said, we've been kicking this can down the road and practicing bleeding. What do we want to do? Tell me what you want to do.
I would say that the option that I would suggest is that we partially open it up in 2014 to release them, because right now you know that we have students that live in Morgan Section that can open up their door and look at the Slover School that are going to Eisenhower. We know that. If those students went to Slover, then you're taking care of some of that problem at Eisenhower.
Can we get the cost to do that without an architect, or would we require an architect even to do that?
That's staffing.
Now, what are you referring to?
Well, Mr. Mackino just suggested, in terms of, phasing it in, starting in September with the 7 classrooms that we have. Do we need an architect for anything for that?
Well, we don't necessarily need an architect, we just need to finish what we've started.
Okay.
So we could probably get that, we could give you a good cost estimate to what it would be. And
Staffing is really the key.
staffing would be more the key, because that's.
We already put wireless in that.
Yes, yes.
So we're on that.
We're in good shape for that.
We have put money in there. I mean,
We put a lot of money down.
We have been putting money into the building.
And I'll call it the side of the building that my office sits in, that whole wing down there, I believe there are 2 classrooms that we didn't get into because the adult school daycare center is there, and there's the one room with the IT that needs to be finished up. So those 3 rooms can be done with ease.
Then, Mr. President, I would also ask the superintendent then, when he does that, to come up with a plan on what's going to happen with the administrators, where they're going to relocate.
Is this a plan?
We already know. what
Okay,
we're doing.
is this a plan and cost that you can get to the board by the February 18th meeting? Is that reasonable?
Now, you're saying what it would cost to.
To start phasing in students there in
We can give you a
September?
preliminary cost for what we think.
Can I just ask a question?
Yep.
Partially phasing it in, does that include lunch for the students?
Yes, you
All
have to-
programs for
you have
those
to
students?
provide
Yeah, we have to
everything
run.
for the students.
Okay, and if you partially phase it in, programs will be provided for those students too, or will busing somewhere to be included? I just want to make sure that those students are not just left there alone just because they're partially moved over.
Some, like for example, we would have to probably ship in lunches and things of that nature because we wouldn't have a full staff. That's something I gotta look at. Because it's a good question, and I'm not really sure whether or not, I'll try to give you a preliminary draft by the 18th. If anything, at least take a look at it, send you a copy of it, and let us think about how we're gonna do this. I talked to Mr. Aguilas last year about possibly doing it, because remember, you have phys ed involved, you
Yeah, I
have
just don't want
specials.
any inequities.
That's what I'm saying, you would have to move people, you'd have part-time people, who do you do to become the principal? These are things that you have to look at.
So then what I would suggest is if you could do that for the 18th, and would the board A, be okay with that, and then B, come prepared on the 18th to also discuss the longer-term plan for Slover in terms of whether or not we want to hire an architect and where we want to go. And that's really a board decision in terms of opening up that, opening that building up the rest of the way.
I suggest that.
Is the board okay with that? Mrs. Bloom?
Yes.
Mr. Balka?
Yes.
Mrs. Stroud?
I'm
Mr.
sorry,
Mackey? Oh, I'm sorry, yes.
I did want to make one or two comments.
Absolutely.
I wanted to mention about the ADA compliant. So is Slover ADA compliant? What would it take to make it that if it's not?
The only portion of the building right now that's probably not ADA compliant is getting students down to the current gym. So that would be something we would have to look at, or some accommodation made to get students from one part of the building to the other. Again, short term, I've seen districts build ramps with covered walkways, and that's how kids get from one side of a building to another to accommodate the ADA part. Again, those are all things, the number of kids facilitates that. ADA compliant into the main level, yes. Down to the lower level, the only way would be to bring them outside.
So all the doorways, well, I guess the doorways are, wheelchair
The
accessible.
doorways don't have to be ADA compliant.
Well, they have to be wheelchair accessible, right?
Into the building. I mean, because right now, some of our other buildings, I don't believe are ADA compliant, but you would have to probably have a room to accommodate if you had an ADA child. But that, again, those are all the things that your architect starts to really look at and tell you what you have to do in regards to those kind of things.
Right, because I'm seeing that as a cost, the cafeteria, the gym.
Well, the cafeteria, keep in mind, if we follow the same method that we do at our elementaries, the covered floor, it's not a cooking kitchen. We satellite out from the middle school there, it becomes a warming station. So the amount of work to bring that to a working condition, in my mind, is not a great expense, because you don't have to build a kitchen. You just have to be able to serve and things of that nature. We're in the process of trying to clean up that area because it's become a storage area. You know, every other building's full, so let's bring it there where there's no one at. So
We have a nice sized gym, so we have what is called a cafeteria. We even have a kitchen there, so if we clean it up, the kitchen is ready to go.
Right, with the roll down gate.
Right, we have the roll down gate. I mean, this building, once we clean, it's got a huge parking lot. You have plenty of access into the building. I figure if we do 7 classrooms next year, that's about 150 kids. You know, if you do, and the following year, if you vote and you fill in another 7 classrooms, you have 300 children in that building. And I still have to figure out how to do specials, because I remember Mr. Aguilas and I were at some conference. We weren't really paying too much of attention to what was going on, and he and I were kind of talking about how we would staff this building in the sense that, you know, that was the most economically efficient. You know what I'm saying? We don't want to go in there and say, okay, we're going to put, you know, X amount. We understand that this is residual costs, and we're in a tough budget cycle right now. So we're probably going to have to, if we open this school up, that's another thing, we have to go to the county and the state, and we have to apply for what is called a waiver, because we're going to probably go over our budget.
Do you have any new staff in the budget yet?
Only for special education.
Special education.
Special education, special education, special education, special education.
And that's also something that we're gonna have to consider as well, because correct me if I'm wrong, but if we go for a waiver, then doesn't the additional portion have to go on the ballot for town approval?
There are certain ways for opening up a new building that don't require
Okay.
county.
Just understand,
That would be
staff
a whole
cost is a cost no matter what we do.
Correct.
You have more students, you need more
Correct.
teachers.
Well, again, if you're going to reduce overcrowding, you know, moving teachers from one building to another is not going to do that. You have to obviously, if you're going to house 150 children and create 7 classes, let's assume you create 7 teachers, that's insurance. You might need a part-time nurse. Most likely you're going to need a full-time nurse, because it's very hard to bring nurses back and forth, because half of the time we don't have enough nurses in the district as it is. Well, in the beginning, we may be able to get away with some things. For administration, maybe we take on some of the responsibilities like we used to do. But what we're gonna try to do is keep the cost down as low as possible in the first year or two. But eventually, by the third year, and then we know exactly what we're doing with our offices. We talked about this over and over. So we have a plan to what we're going to do with our offices. We've been waiting for this move for 3 years. So we slowly but surely have been doing some of the classrooms, refurbishing them. Dennis has done a nice job. We have 7 brand new classrooms. You want to go take a look at them. They're probably one of the nicer classrooms in the district. They have bathrooms for the kindergartens. They're oversized classrooms. They're bigger than normal because this is an older building. And everything's been refurbished. So we could probably by next year have 10 classrooms. I'm not saying we're going to have 10 classrooms in there.
Great.
Is there?
All right, hang on, we're going to continue right on down. So, Mrs. Strapp, any other questions?
Yes.
Okay.
So, well, sorry, I have 2 questions. I'm gonna go to the second, because I forgot the first.
You waited too long.
Yes. The cost that we spent for Dr. Bowen and Antunes, what was that cost?
$6,000.
Okay, that's what I thought it was, and I think that that was money well spent, so I appreciate your work. And
Well, we made a decision, it was 9-0, so it was really money well spent.
And you are a yes, correct, for the planned opening for Slover in September, and then come prepared on the 18th to talk about a longer-term plan for that.
yes, and thank you, because I remember my follow-up with the parent, I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name, sir, but was maybe possibly having, what would it cost to have an additional help in Eisenhower for those?
A teacher.
Well, no, I'm talking about like a paraprofessional type of a teacher.
You need a teacher.
Well,
I know what you're saying. You could have a paraprofessional too. But it's something that we would have to discuss. It's a personnel issue. We would need to take a look at that. Right now, we're probably way over in paraprofessionals for various different reasons. I mean, I don't want to get into it, but we are very much over for paraprofessionals, and we pretty much stuck to the budget with teachers though this year.
Because I feel the pain of the 27 students, with one teacher from all perspectives. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McEnroe?
I think so, yes.
You're a yes. Okay, I am also a yes. Mrs. DePinto?
I am a yes.
Okay, Mrs. Backo, I think you had a question.
Yes, and I just have a follow-up question, based on like the cafeteria and building that and all that. Do we, the capital, if we did do this for September, do we have money in the capital budget that we could squeeze out to do anything?
We have capital reserve right now of $1.9 million.
Right, but that had to encompass the roof, right, as well, and the
And
security?
again, there's been no determination on what we're going to do with it, so
So there's 1.9 available that has no final decision. That's what's
no
left.
real direction at this point what to do with
How
1.9.
about Slover?
That's the board's desire.
But if we put all the money in Slover, then the security issues would, because that would go by the wayside.
Again,
Because that's the same 1.9 million.
but you have to keep in mind, if you accept your ROD grants for projects, you have to fund your portion with the capital reserve.
Security upgrades is a good extra value.
So you got to keep all those things in
So we
mind.
don't actually have 1.9.
You have 1.9 in theory, but if you apply for your ROD grants and you say that we're going to accept Truman School roof, per se, that's estimated at 1.4, if we're getting $400,000 in funding, you have to put up the other $1 million. That could eat into it. So again, we're in that juggling act as what becomes the real priority moving forward.
Okay, Mr. Brzezinski?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Okay, I think we have direction. Anything else for the board? And I will open up the public in case anyone wants to say anything.
Yes, I just want to go on the record as saying I'm against art on a card.
You're biased.
Mrs. Bloom, for those of you who don't know, is a former art teacher in our district. Any other comments from the board? And I'll open it up to public if you wish to address us on any matter concerning the district. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming, and have a good evening. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
By Mr.